Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness, text number 5. Yat sankai papate stanam tad yoga api gamyate ekam sankyam cha yogam cha yak pashyati sapashyati yat sankhya papate stanam tad yoga api gamyate ekam sankyam to yogam cha yak pashyati sapashyati. And tad yoga api gamyate sankyam to yogam cha yak pashyati sapashyati. Ladies. Yat sankhya prapyate stanam tad yoga api gamyate ekam sankyam to yogam cha yak pashyati sapashyati. Okay. Yat. What? Sankhya, by means of Sankhya philosophy. Prapyate is achieved. Stanam, place. That. Yogai, by devotional service. Api, also. Gamyate, one can attain. Ekam, one. Sankyam, analytical study. Cha, and. Yogam, action in devotion. Cha, and. Ya, one who. Pashyati, sees. Sa, he. Pashyati, actually sees. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are. Purport. The real purpose of philosophical research is to find the ultimate goal of life. Since the ultimate goal of life is self-realization, there is no difference between the conclusions reached by the two processes. By Sankhya philosophical research, one comes to the conclusion that a living entity is not part and parcel of the material world, but of the Supreme Spirit whole. Consequently, the Spirit soul has nothing to do with the material world. His actions must be in some relation with the Supreme. When he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is actually in his constitutional position. In the first process, Sankhya, one has to become detached from matter, and in the devotional yoga process, one has to attach himself to the work of Krishna consciousness. Factually, both processes are the same, although superficially, one process appears to involve detachment, and the other process appears to involve attachment. Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. One who sees these things, sees things as they are. Yet sankyam prapite stanam tad yoga api yukamyate ekam apyasitam samyak ubaya vidite phalam yak pashyati sapashyati yat sankyam prapite stanam tad yoga api kamyate ekam sankyam to yogam cha yak pashyati sapashyati. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be obtained by devotional service, and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service be on the same level, sees things as they are. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tiramane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya De Siddharane. This is one of the repeated points in the Bhagavad Gita, that which is better, renunciation of the fruits of work or to work in devotional service, or which is better, Brahman realization or Paramatma realization or Krishna consciousness. And here in this chapter, Krishna seems to be a little softer. Usually in the third chapter, he just says, immediately, forget about, you've misunderstood what I said, that actually I was trying to tell you to work in devotion, not to stop work. But here he says, actually, if you want to go through the whole analytical process of Sankhya Yoga, it's all right, but it may take you a long time, and ultimately you just realize you're not this body. And if you read the first instruction of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, you can find that out immediately. You don't have to spend the next 50 lifetimes. But you can take a choice. If you want to go through the whole thing, then Bhavanam Jamanamante, Jnanamam Prabhadyate, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, Sarvamahatma Sadurlava. After passing through many, many births and deaths, one who's actually knowledge knows me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great personality is rare. It's rare anyone's going to go through such a process for so many lifetimes. And the process, of course, is still hearing, is to learn how to hear, and to hear, you have to go through so many austerities. You have to give up so many things, because just like nowadays, now they have the coronavirus scare, not only here, but all around the world. India, I was talking to Hridaya Chaitanya Guru, and he's the co-GBC for Mayapur. And he said that India now, they just passed 21 days, you can't leave India or you can't come into India. So if you're trying to go to India, forget it, at least for 21 days. And he said in Mayapur, they closed the temple. No one can go into the temple or go out of it except for the pujaris. And there's no one walking around Mayapur. He said he went from the Lotus building to the Ishodan building where he lives, and he only saw 2 devotees. And they were more than 6 meters away. So, now is the time of restriction. People are busily trying to go on the internet to get knowledge. They're offering so many courses now. You have to stay at home, but you can watch our yoga course or our meditation course or freedom from anxiety course or how to boost your immune system. So people value knowledge, and people are trying to get some awareness, some knowledge. So when you're restricted, knowledge means restricted. When you're restricted, then naturally you want to get knowledge, because there's nothing else to get. If you're confined to bed, then either people watch television, or they listen to music, or they want to get some experience, but they can't get it from activity, so they get it through utilizing their mind and whatever intelligence they may have. So Sankhya philosophy means they restrict you. You can't hardly do anything. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing, and he was getting criticized for that. He was dancing and singing, and he was criticized by the Mayavadi sannyasis. This person's completely violating all our principles. He's actually dancing. So you can imagine, the only thing you can do is take pleasure by reading Vedanta. That was the conclusion. And if you ever read Vedanta, to take pleasure in reading Vedanta, you have to be on a certain level of awareness. Vedanta is all sutras. First of all, to understand what the sutras are is, it takes a lot of endeavor to do that. And the whole idea is you're restricted until you're not doing anything whatsoever. You're in Brahman. That's the knowledge. In order to reach Brahman, you have to give up everything, including common sense. Which, of course, as we know in this age, is not very common anyhow. And at the end, Krishna will say in the next verse that after going through all those problems, trying to give up everything, and it takes many, many lifetimes, because we may as Krishna said in the other chapter, that you may give up something artificially, but your mind will tend to dwell on it. Unless you can actually get a higher taste, it's very hard to give anything up. So it takes a lot of, first of all, you probably have to suffer for many lifetimes, first of all, extreme suffering. And then you reach the conclusion, I'm getting out of here. And then no matter what's trying to attract you, you keep on remembering your suffering and think, no way, I'm going back to that again. And so you have to go through lifetime after lifetime. And generally, you may almost get Brahman, and then you fall down, like Vishwamrita Muni. After meditating for 60,000 years, he was only trying to get second initiation. And he was meditating for 60,000 years, hoping that he would actually become a Brahmin, just get Brahmin initiation. And Indra thought, well, all right, why is this man meditating for 60,000 years? He could have joined a local temple, he could have got initiated in 1 year, or 2 years at the most. Why is he meditating for 60,000 years? Just to get second initiation. So he thought, well, obviously he's trying to take over my post. So Indra has his secret weapon. That's the apsaras. So he told one of the apsaras, go get him. So he was sitting there meditating, eyes closed, and he heard the ankle bells of Menaka. And he thought, well, I haven't heard anything like that for a while. I'll just take a peek and then I'll go back to my meditation. Don't worry, I'm not going to get attracted at all. Just want to find out what I'm renouncing. So he opened his eyes, and the rest was history. And after being with Menaka for 100 years, and he had one daughter, her name was Shakuntala, one of the most beautiful ladies on record. So then he thought, well, I only opened my eyes for a second, but look what I got into. So he went back to meditation, and another 60,000 years went by. And he said, oh, all right, he never gives up. So he tried to convince another apsara to go. She said, no way. So Indra gave her special insurance, life insurance. So she was convinced, she went, he heard the ankle bells again, and he said, there she is again. She spoiled my first 60,000 years. Now she's going to try and spoil the next 60,000 years. So he was so angry that he opens his eyes, and out of his eyes came fire, and he burnt the poor apsara to ashes. She couldn't even collect her insurance. So now he fell down due to anger this time. So he went back to another 60,000 years of meditation. And Indra thought, all right, I probably won't be able to get any apsara to go this time. So he said, all right, so I'll leave him alone. So then Brahma came after 180,000 years, and he got second initiation. I mean, that's determination. But the point of the story is, we may try to give things up, but it's not so easy. Even Gop Kumara, out of many lifetimes, he was going through the universe, going from one planet to the next. Of course, if you read the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it appears almost instantaneously that he's going from one planetary system to the next, from just an ordinary person, an ordinary cowherd boy on the banks of the Ganges. He gets initiated by his spiritual master. Then he goes to a king, and he hears about the glories of one place after another. He winds up going to Indraloka by chanting his mantra. Then he goes to Mahaloka, then Tapaloka, Janaloka, Siddhaloka, Brahmaloka. And this takes many, many lifetimes. And doesn't end there. He starts going through the coverings of the universe, that there are living entities living in the coverings of the universe. And there are deities there also. And the coverings are much bigger. I mean, our inside of this universe is just really tiny. If you take a dot and you draw it something like 40 kilometers from here, so the dot, that represents the inside of the universe, and the 40 kilometers from here, all that different types of energy, earth, water, fire, represents the coverings of the universe. So he went through the inside of the universe and he started to go through the coverings of the universe and meeting different temptations there. And finally he came to the last covering of the universe. He progressed because he didn't accept the offerings of the personification of those coverings, who offered him different things. Opulence is even greater than that in Brahmaloka. Mystic powers and all kinds of things. But finally he got to the covering, and who greeted him there? Maya, sex personified. He says, why don't you stay here, keep me company for a while? So he said, forget it. And he left. I don't know, he left immediately because otherwise he would have been there for a long time. And then what did he get? He emerged in Brahman. Kind of merged because he wasn't really so much interested in Brahman because he was chanting his mantra, his Gopal mantra. He was actually interested more in Gopal. But he merged in Brahman, and when he merged in Brahman, because he wasn't so much interested in personalism, Krishna himself appeared in Brahman. But then he would fade out and he'd enter into Brahman again. So then he got out of there. Who knows how long it took. The point is, to get to Brahman realization, you have to spend many, many lifetimes of trying to give things up. And then after you give things up for so many lifetimes, then when you have to, it's almost impossible to try to accept the personal nature of the Supreme after that. You spend so long trying to give up any kind of personality that when you finally achieve it, it's very hard to imagine that you're actually could be a person again. So that's one of the three aspects of material existence, actually. Fear of a personal spiritual identity, the concept of void that underlies a frustration in life, and the attachment to materialism, to material conceptions of life. So these are the three main impediments for devotional service. Obviously, when you merge in Brahman, there's a fear of a personal spiritual identity, and it's practically impossible to actually make any kind of advancement after you become an impersonalist. Therefore, the worst thing that can happen to someone, ultimately, is accept the impersonal path. Because if you're successful, then your spiritual life is practically finished. And if you're unsuccessful, then your spiritual life is usually finished because you become merged in materialism. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, practically the worst thing that can happen to you is to become an impersonalist. What is that? Mayavadi. To hear Mayavadi Bhasha, when Swarup Damodar he wouldn't allow anyone to recite before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu unless he first gave the recitation to Swarup Damodar Maharaj. Because he didn't want Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to hear impersonalism or rasabhas or anything like that. And obviously it's quite difficult to discriminate between them, because when this poet came in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and recited before Swarup Damodar his poetry about Lord Jagannath and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that both of them are the supreme, one of them is made out of wood, doesn't move, and the other one's, are moving. So Swarup Damodar chastised the poet, said, you're a rascal. You're a downright impersonalist. We shouldn't even be listening to you. And he corrected his philosophical mistakes, that Jagannath is not wood. Jagannath is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord himself also. But Mayavadi philosophy is, if you actually spend the time to learn Sanskrit, if you actually go through the whole thing and spend the time listening to Mayavadi philosophy, then you get into difficulty. Luckily, we can't even remember a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. What to speak of learning Sanskrit? So we're not going to get bewildered because we're too bewildered to get bewildered. But as we can see, there was one coward boy whose name was Bhagavan Das. And he had his brother had spent time, considerable time, learning Sharirak Bhasha, the commentary, I think it was a Sharirak Bhasha, or some other commentary of Mayavadi philosophy. And he became an expert scholar on it. So when his brother came to visit Bhagavan Das, who is eternally a coward boy in his spiritual identity, then he wanted to recite his learning before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, he wanted to teach this to Bhagavan Das. But Swarup Damodar Maharaj chastised him. He said, if you hear Mayavadi philosophy, even you're a Mahabhagavat, which Bhagavan Das was, then you'll fall down. And even if you don't fall down, but Bhagavan Das protested. He said, I'm fixed in service to the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How is it possible that I can fall down? So Swarup Damodar Maharaj said that even if you don't fall down, you'll become disheartened by hearing this Mayavadi philosophy that claims that God doesn't even exist. You'll actually become very sorry to hear such a philosophy. So Bhagavan Das understood, tell his brother, go home, get out of here, go back to wherever he came from. So we have to be careful about, although Krishna is saying, of course, Sankhya Yoga Pritag Bala, Sanya, what is it? Yat Sankhya Prapite Sthanam Tod Yoga. This is the same thing, yes. One will realize by devotional service in the course of time that we're eternal. As we become more conscious of Krishna, then we become more conscious of our eternal nature. And at the state of Nishtha, one actually realizes that one is eternal, and therefore one is not attracted to temporary sense objects. And one can actually start making actual spiritual progress. Actual real spiritual progress begins at Nishtha. Of course, to get to Nishtha, one has to make progress also. And the same process to make progress is there. In other words, to get to the state of Nishtha, you have to become absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But the state of Nishtha just becomes more intense, that's all. The ecstasy and the enlightenment becomes more steady and more intense as it goes from Nishtha to Ruchi, to Sakti, to Bhava, to Prema. But the same process is there. On the other hand, if you take to the impersonal, indirect way, which I don't think any of us are really going to take to. Nowadays, the impersonalists, are pretty useless. No intelligent person can take them seriously. Like this impersonalist Rajneesh. Rajneesh was actually a famous brahmachari at one time. You know Rajneesh also? You've heard of Rajneesh? What's that? You heard of Rajneesh? So he was a famous brahmachari. So he was a little proud. So one time he put a advertisement in all Indian newspapers that I'm a Paka brahmachari. I challenge any woman to have me fall down. So you challenge Maya, good luck. So one famous prostitute in Delhi said, I take up the challenge. So he spent the night with her, and then the next day he wrote an article called Liberation from Sex. He was no longer a famous brahmachari, he became famous for other things. But he wrote books, he wrote a lot of books. And one of the books, I was doing a lecture at one bookstore, and I saw one of his books, so I wanted to see what he was saying. So I picked up the book, I opened it up, and it was blank. The whole book was blank. That was his ultimate book. Because in a previous book he wrote in the book, don't read books. So he's writing a book and telling you not to read a book. So anyone who's actually going to study his books obviously is not very intelligent. It's like the philosophy, everyone is guru. You don't need a guru because everyone's guru. So you don't need, whoever told you that, you don't need them. You should have known that all along because you're already guru. Why do you need them to tell you that you're guru? You should have known that. But you need a guru to tell you you're guru. So this is all nonsense. So this is the type of Mayavadi philosophy that they have nowadays. It's useless. The other Mayavadi philosophy, based on Sanskrit, is much more subtle, based upon all kinds of distortions of Sanskrit logic and interpretation, whatever else. So there's little danger of us becoming Mayavadis in the sense of an expert impersonalist. But instead of that, people simply become impersonalists. Hearing Mayavadi philosophy, which is very common, as Brahmananda said, Prabhu said, in 26th Avenue, Prabhupada was constantly talking against the Mayavadis. So Brahmananda and others, they concluded that the Mayavadis were probably a group of people that Prabhupada had a conflict with in India. And because he was so disturbed by fighting with them, when he came to America, he couldn't forget. So he kept on criticizing them whenever he had a chance. And then one day he was sitting in class because he didn't know who the Mayavadis were, and then he realized, oh, we're the Mayavadis. Because Mayavadi philosophy is so prominent in the current situation. But people can't work according to Mayavadi philosophy. This is really, people are not going to sit down and meditate on Brahman. They don't even know what Brahman is, or to speak of meditation. So, hearing Mayavadi philosophy, which is the conclusion that there is no reality to anything, existentialism, when I went to college, that was big, existentialism. What was Steppenwolf? Did you hear of Steppenwolf? There was a book called Steppenwolf. Hermann Hesse. Was that Mayavadi or nihilism or kind of impersonalism, whatever? I never could get through the books. I don't even know. I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me. So, anyhow, this is quite but what is the result? People are simply materialists, that's all. They simply merge into sense gratification. that after so-called impersonalism, which most people are impersonalists, especially even in India, people, they claim they're devotees of Krishna, but they're usually impersonalists. Like one lady came to the Sunday feast a long time ago in one of the temples, and I was talking to her, and she said, "Oh, Krishna, I have a deity of Krishna. I love Krishna. I worship him every day." So, I thought maybe she had some connection with Krishna. And then she said, "Yes, and one day I'll become Krishna." So this is very common. People have these ideas. Therefore, to actually have the opportunity to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness as it actually is and practice it, although it brings one to a much more simple level, it's a much more simple process, and it simplifies one's consciousness, hopefully. It's much more easy. But it brings one simultaneously to all the different stages of realization. Because even those who are practicing the Ashtanga Yoga system, of course, they should have already gone through the Karma Yoga system, which means they should have already practically given up hankering and lamentation, and the Jnana Yoga system, which means that they should have been more or less concentrating on developing their intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and then they come to the level where they can peacefully sit, practice pranayama, and then therefore go through the process of pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Meditate on the supersoul. But who's on that level? Therefore, and who's going to practice karma yoga in this age? There is no karma yoga in this age, outside of Krishna consciousness. Karma yoga usually means you go to a yoga ashram and they have you do all the work there. They call it karma yoga. But that's not karma yoga. And jnana yoga, there is no jnana yoga in this age either. People just talk all kinds of nonsense in the name of jnana. So who's going to go through it? So therefore, harinama, 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 eva kevalam, kalo nasteva, 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 gande anyata. The only process in this age is actually chanting Hare Krishna, which also means we have to give up all the other things. We have to give up our misconceptions. But if we just try to concentrate on the chanting, then naturally the misconceptions will go away, our attachments and our aversions, if we try to concentrate. The problem is we don't try and concentrate. Why? Because we don't really believe in Krishna. We don't really believe that I should be calling out to Radha and Krishna to engage me in their service, because we have little idea what their service really means. We think, oh, they're going to engage in my service. I've already got enough to do today. Why should I pray for more? They got me washing the pots, doing the third, all the offerings, and I got, what do I got to pray for more service? I got plenty of it already. Because we don't really understand what it means to engage in loving service to Radha and Krishna. Therefore, we don't really feelingly, attentively call out for it, because we don't know what the value of it is. If someone was saying, well, I have in my pocket, I have this new iPhone 15 or whatever it is. Would anyone like to give me an offering for it? Probably someone would start with at least €5. They'd make some offering, check their pocket. I got €10, 20 euros, got to hit 20. People have some idea what an iPhone is worth. But because we don't know what the value of Krishna consciousness is, therefore we're not so anxious even to ask for it. But that we have to learn gradually. If we hear the philosophy correctly and then ascertain that it's actually worthwhile to at least try and ask for it, try to see what it's like, just pray to Krishna, at least reveal a little bit what it's like to me so I can develop some desire to become serious, then Krishna will reciprocate. He's not a dead stone. If we actually even sincerely ask him for some insight, what is this all about? I've been here for 20 years, I still don't know what's going on. Could you please tell me? Oh, finally you asked. It only took you 20 years to become a little inquisitive of what you're doing here. Finally, the LSD has worn off. You realize where you are. Oh, I'm in the Hare Krishna temple. How did I ever get there? What happened the last 20 years? What is these strange beads I got? My God, what's going on? My hair, what happened to my hair? But if we ask Krishna, then Krishna will actually reciprocate with us and give us some insight what we're actually supposed to be doing here. And then our path should become at least clearer. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? Yes. My questionnaire, he's my plant. I give him Mahaprasada.
It's a very impressive story with Vishwamitra doing 180,000 years of austerities to get his second initiation. We do hear and read that the demigods will send obstacles, but also in the first canto, Srila Prabhupada says there is an invisible chain of cooperation between the demigods and devotees. So, do they help or do they make obstacles, and how?
Well,
what is it?
Vishwamrita wasn't a devotee. Vishwamrita wasn't a devotee. He was a yogi, and therefore, devotees, their aim is to become Krishna conscious, and usually the demigods don't interfere. But I guess just like Prithu Maharaj, who's doing tried to do 100 sacrifices. Indra didn't interfere with Prithu Maharaj because he thought that he might try to take his post over. He interfered because he was envious that he was going to do the same amount of sacrifices I did. He didn't present obstacles for Prithu Maharaj's spiritual advancement. He just presented obstacles because he didn't want him to get the same fame that he had for performing sacrifices. But for yogis, Indra only interferes with them because he's afraid they're trying to take his position away. But he knows the devotees aren't interested, therefore he helps them because he gets some credit for it also. Anything else? Thank you very much. Krantaraj Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai.